Welcome to this edition of the Native News Update on this Wednesday, December 16th. I'm your host for today's program, Paul Demain. Many of the stories read here can also be found at our website at IndianCountryNews.com. Here are the news stories for the day from the Associated Press and other Native news sources. A group of Native American inmates has filed a federal lawsuit against the South Dakota Department of Corrections, saying a new prison policy that bans the use of tobacco during religious ceremonies is discriminatory. The Native American Council of Tribes, an organization based at the state penitentiary in Sioux Falls, asked the U.S. District Court to prevent the policy from being enforced. Inmates Blaine Brings Plenty, the group's chair, said in the complaint that for Native American prayer to be effective, it must be embodied in tobacco and offered within a ceremonial framework. The suit filed last week lists Warden Doug Weber, Corrections Secretary Timothy Reish, and Attorney General Marty Jackley as the defendants. The state prison system went tobacco-free in 2000 but made an exception for tobacco used in Native American ceremonies. In an October 19th letter announcing the policy change to tribal liaisons, spiritual leaders, pipe carriers, and sun dancers, Weber said that tobacco used during ceremonies was becoming increasingly abused, and inmates had been caught separating it from their pipe and the tie mixtures. United States Federal Judge Lawrence L. Pearsall has entered an order setting Tuesday, February 16th, 2010 as the dates for the trial of both John Boy Patton Graham and Vine Richard Marshall, also known as Dick Marshall. Marshall and Graham are both charged with different acts committed during the kidnapping, rape, and execution-style murder of Anime Piktuakwash on the Pine Ridge Reservation on or around December 12, 1975. Her murder was allegedly ordered by leadership members of the American Indian Movement who thought she was working for the FBI and might reveal information about Leonard Peltier and the shooting of two FBI agents on June of 1975 and the 1973 murder of black civil rights worker Perry Ray Robinson Jr., who was shot inside Wounded Knee during its occupation and remains buried there in an undisclosed location. Several jurisdictional issues remain unresolved in the case of John Graham, and his trial may still be severed from the February 16, 2010 trial date set. The state of Wisconsin has awarded counties and tribes $700,000 in law enforcement grants. The money comes from payments the tribes make to the state from their gaming revenues. It's typically divided between tribal police departments and the sheriff's department that patrol reservations for equipment and other expenses. The awards are based on tribal populations, violent crime rates, and unemployment. Wisconsin is a public law 280 state in which the state has jurisdiction over major crimes rather than the federal government, except in the case of the Menominee Nation. Assistant Secretary of Indian Affairs Larry Echohawk announced that he has named Dr. Sherry R. Allison, who is currently the acting president of the Southwestern Indian Polytechnic Institute located in Albuquerque, New Mexico, as the SIPI president. Dr. Allison, who is an enrolled member of the Navajo Nation of Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah, has been serving as acting president since January 5, 2009. The appointment is effective beginning December 6th. I'm pleased that Dr. Sherry Allison has accepted the post of president of the Southwestern Indian Polytech Institute on a permanent basis, said Echohawk. Her extensive background in the field of American Indian education and her commitment to excellence has inspired my confidence that she is the right leader to take SIPI, or SIPI, into its fourth decade. And in our continuing discussion on a national health bill and legislation, here is a short update with Shoshone-Bannock tribal member Mark Trahant, who is covering the issue for this year as a Kaiser Media Fellow. Mark, what can you tell us about the latest on this great health care debate in the country? Are we going anywhere?
Well, today we're having a lot of fun. What's going on is an amendment was issued to look at single-payer care, which would make a lot of sense. And the Republicans reacted by requiring the clerk to read it. It's a 670-page amendment, and so they're reading all 670 pages. So essentially there's not going to be a lot of action in the Senate today. The real action is they're still trying to make sure they have 60 votes. They were able to get the sometime Democrat Lieberman on board, but whether or not the Liberals will stick with it is a good question. For Indian country, I think it's really interesting because so much attention's been put on the idea of a public option, and whether or not that survives, I think is interesting. But there are so many other provisions for Indian country that are really good that would get lost if they have to pare it down. For example, one of the alternatives is to go what's called reconciliation, which would make it a budget bill. And if they did that, it would only require 50 votes, but we would lose almost all of the Indian country provisions.
Because those provisions were in there as amendments?
Because they're not directly related to the budget.
Okay. And when we're talking about it directly related to the health care budget, it's policy rather than money issues in the health care budget. Does that make the difference, or what's making the difference for relevancy on those provisions?
Right. If it's an overall policy goal, they require basically 60 votes. If they can get it framed as simply a budget issue, then it can pass with 50 votes. I think that's a really good debate to have. Is first, you have to remember that the United States Senate is one of the most anti-democratic institutions in this country. You have a state like Wyoming with a few 100,000 people, and then a state like California with 40 million, 60 million, and both have equal representation.
Both got two senators.
Exactly.
In other words, the small states have small Republican states have a great deal of power, and Lieberman has it all.
Right, and when you magnify that the small states have that power by the fact that Senate rules require 60 votes for most issues. And that's what produces a pretty, I think, anti-democratic institution. That's not in the Constitution. It could be changed with a 50-vote majority. So at some point, I think people are going to start asking, is this really how we want to govern as a country? Because we just can't get to consensus on some of these tough issues.
I wanted to go back to something you said earlier about this option, this government public option. If the public option doesn't survive in the overall bill, that doesn't impact the current Indian Health Service as it is established in any way, does it?
Not at all. It would be an extra. At both this point, both in the House and Senate bill, American Indians and Alaska Natives are exempt from the requirement to purchase health insurance, which every other American is going to have to do under all of these bills. Now, the public option would make it so that you could buy that insurance from a public entity, and basically a U.S.-owned insurance company. The good thing is that is not part of the debate either way, both sides have agreed to that are for the bill, is that there would be generous subsidies whether you buy from the private or public option. To give you an example of how good those subsidies are, under COBRA, my insurance bill right now would be something for my family around $1,500 a month, and I'm able to pay. Actually, it's less than $1,200 a month, and I'm able to pay almost $400 a month under the Special Recovery Act funds. If this bill passes, that's about what my private insurance bill would be because of the generous subsidies. So whether it's public or private, the subsidies are there either way.
And the subsidies will certainly help off-reservation Native Americans, because is the exemption from the provisions affect Native people by residency, or is it a blanket? If you're an American Indian, you're exempted from the provision?
It seems to be a straight exemption right now. And I'm not sure. I think that's probably the only way they could implement it. It's part of the tax code, so I think that's probably how they'll have to go.
So a Native American living in Kansas City, Kansas, where there might not be an Indian Health Service, would be exempted, but not necessarily because they're accessible to a non-reservation Indian Health Service clinic.
Correct.
Okay.
And the good part of that is that, and urban Indians are most of the population now, is that those who do get insurance could then use that at, say, an urban Indian health clinic and actually boost their resources.
Indeed. Okay, well, let's get back to you. We'll talk a little bit more with you as this bill moves along. We appreciate your time, Mark. We'll keep in touch with you again.
Very good.
And that is the latest roundup of news from Indian Country on this edition of the Native News Update. We want to thank you and you and you and you and all of you for joining with us again. Come again soon. Miigwech.